King of the Hill. Hey, hello, how do you do? Shady Doorags here. After I did my John Redcorn video, I got a ton of requests from you intellectuals to talk about other detestable characters from King of the Hill. And finally, over a year later, I've made it to the end of the list. That's not to say there aren't plenty of other unlikable characters I can talk about in this show, but with this video, I'll have finally hit all the big ones. These characters tend to sit somewhere on a spectrum for me. On the one hand, you have characters like Peggy and Cotton, whom I can acknowledge what they do as awful, but that's what makes them fun to watch. And then you have characters like John Redcorn and Nancy, whose awfulness is not enjoyable, but rather it just makes me hate them because they're bad people. Buck Strickland sits exactly in the middle for me. I don't hate him because of the awful things he does, but they don't make him entertaining for me either. He's just an unlikable character who doesn't particularly affect me in any sort of meaningful way. Which means the motivation for today's episode is not mouse-snarling anger nor character appreciation. You guys wanted a Buck episode, so I just chose the one I thought would be the most fun to talk about. Today we're going to look at the episode What Happens at the National Propane Convention, and then I got too lazy to finish reading the title. This episode takes place in the very last season and does its best to address Hank's overall relationship with Buck and give it a finale of sorts. But before we get into wrapping it up, we should probably actually talk about the relationship between Buck and Hank itself. Hank has worked for Strickland Propane under Buck for over 20 years. Normally, Hank wouldn't be associated with a character like Buck, who was well known for his greedy personality and constant debauchery. Hank, however, grew up with very little support from his father, Cotton. So when Buck started showing Hank appreciation, Hank in return started looking up to Buck and treating him like a father figure. Hank has so much dedication to Buck, he has out loud said that he loves the man. If you know how much Hank struggles with emotions, you know what a big deal that is. Because of his hero worship, Hank often excuses any faults that are found on Buck, while also covering for them. Meanwhile, Buck recognizes that Hank is his golden goose. He does what he can to keep Hank happy so that he never quits, but only the bare minimum. Not only that, but Buck pushes Hank's generosity as far as it can possibly go, taking advantage of Hank's love of propane and working to get out of situations that have nothing to do with their jobs. Shoot, there was one time Buck even framed Hank for murder.
Sorry about that whole frame up there, Tano. I was under a lot of stress.
Yeah.
Point is, Hank has always been there for Buck and sees him as a father figure, but Buck has rarely ever been there for Hank. They have a parasitic relationship that most fans are not too happy about. Alright, that's all the context you need. Let's jump into the episode. So the episode starts with the employees of Strickland Propane gathered outside of Buck's office.
I'm starting to worry. Mr. Strickland's been in his office with the door shut for more than an hour.
Really, episode? You couldn't go 5 seconds without delivering clunky exposition dialogue? It turns out that nothing's wrong with Buck. He was just on the phone getting some news. He announces that he's going to be inducted into the Hall of Flame at a convention in Memphis, which I have no idea if that's real or not. Okay, so the internet says there is a Hall of Flame, but it's all about firefighting equipment, and there is a Hall of Fame in Memphis, but it's all about music. Did this fictional show just lie to me?
Oh, my lord, sir, that's the highest achievement possible in propane.
I want you to introduce me at the induction ceremony.
This is the greatest honor I will ever know.
All of this is to remind us of Buck and Hank's relationship, as well as set up that Hank sees Buck's opportunity as a great honor, one he thinks he himself will never get to have. Buck continues to foreshadow what's to come by making a big deal out of Hank being his right-hand man. He then decides to celebrate his accomplishments by inviting everyone to drink breakfast whiskey, reminding Hank of what being Buck's right-hand man means. So the scene transitions to the Hills house and...
Tell me about the sport coat again, Dad.
Oh, this dialogue. Did they not get rewrites for this episode? Like, that's an easy fix. Instead of having Bobby say, Dad, have him say, what about the coat, Dad? What's it like? Hank describes the coat that Buck will get to wear and continues to hammer into the audience that he himself will never get into the Hall of Flame. Immediately after, Hank laments to Peggy that he's afraid Buck might mess up his big moment.
You have kept him out of trouble for 23 years. But if you need me for backup, I am an expert fun blocker.
That was almost funny, Peggy, but you're not quite there. These later seasons really did a number on the comedy. Still, I'm appreciative of how supportive Peggy is being here. Normally they throw in a line about her real reasons for going with Hank, or show some of her superiority complex, but no, this episode wanted to focus on her ability to be a dedicated wife. Is that out of character? It both does and doesn't feel out of character. So Hank and the boys head to Memphis for the convention. Oh yeah, did I neglect to mention that Dale, Bill, and Boomhauer are in this episode? That might be because the episode neglected to mention it to me. The boys just randomly show up at the convention, and again, Boomhauer is denied any lines. Like, I don't get it. Did Mike Judge just not want to do his voice because it hurts his throat? Why have him in the episode if he's not gonna say anything? Hank and Peggy are on high alert for Buck's shenanigans, but it turns out to be all for naught, as Buck is not only on his best behavior, but is dominating and winning people over. Peggy decides that since the A story no longer needs her, she's gonna go create a B story.
Strickland propane? Oh, shoot, I requested a booth next to the men's room.
Good Lord, sir, there are 2 Strickland propanes.
Are you the great Buck Strickland?
None other? Who are you?
I'm your bastard son.
Who? I mean, yes, Buck's son, that I definitely knew about. They mentioned him several times in other episodes. What, you think I don't know King of the Hill lore? I know the lore. I'm the King of the Hill guy. I know everything there is to know about King of the Hill. Did you know it got renewed for more seasons? What? So Buck's son Jody, or as Buck calls him, Ray Roy, introduces himself and the 2 Stricklands go off to bond. When Buck offers Ray Roy a drink, he turns out to be a chip off the old block and counter offers to get completely plastered. Hank reminds Buck about their responsibilities, but his boss pulls the usual Buck card and tells Hank to cover for him. Later, Hank laments to the boys about how Ray Roy is causing Buck to lose focus and how he might have to take steps to separate them. Hank, remember your wife? The whole reason you brought her here was in case Buck was too much for you to handle. Go get her! Dale mentions what this episode should have been about.
You want to keep Buck Strickland away from his own son. Admit it, Hank. You're jealous.
But it's a theory that's immediately shut down and has very little relevance to the plot.
Why would I want to be Buck's son when I'm his assistant manager?
Translation? Love me, Daddy.
Wow, Dale, that's an awful thing to say to someone whose actual dad is dead, especially considering the relationship Hank had with Cotton. So the episode goes on with Ray Roy and Buck continuing to bring out the worst of each other. Hank covers for Buck, insisting Buck's behavior will improve, but Buck keeps letting him down.
Buck Strickland a no-show? No problem. Meet friends of Buck Strickland.
Was the word cringe a meme yet, or were the 2000s too early? Where the crap is my funny King of the Hill?
Your boss should take conventions more seriously. The United States Constitution was written at a convention.
Wow. Lady, those were the perfect words to guilt trip Hank. Hank is entrusted with Buck's rainbow blazer, showing the responsibility he has over this situation. Meanwhile, in the B plot, Peggy tries to get close with the greatest wives in all of propane. And because of her gumption, she succeeds. Oh yeah, did I neglect to mention that Joseph and Bobby were at this convention? Well, that might be because Hank continues to try and get Buck under control, but it's the same old, same old.
Buck and Ray Roy are getting out of control.
Well, you'd better figure out a way to handle those 2. While not impossible, you cannot count on one of them to choke on his own vomit.
Holy crap, Peggy, that took a dark turn. But more importantly, it was funny, and I really needed some good humor in this episode. So Hank has one more trick up his... Wait a second, go back to that last scene.
Well, you'd better figure out a way to handle those 2. While not impossible, you cannot count on one of them to choke on his own vomit.
I got so distracted by the joke I almost forgot to chastise. Peggy, isn't the whole reason you're here because you're supposed to help Hank get Buck under control? Like, I get you got your B story, but the A story needs you again. So Hank has one more trick up his sleeve.
In 6 hours, you're supposed to be inducted into the Propane Hall of Flame, and I'm not sure you're gonna make it.
Dang it, I'm trying, Hank.
No, you're not. Trying would be Ray Roy inviting you somewhere and you wanting to say no, but eventually caving. But in order to cave, there has to be some resistance first, and you're not resisting.
I got to make it up to my boy for neglecting him all these years. He got into propane because of me.
So did I, sir.
Yeah, no snarky comment from me here. That was a really well written and well executed line. It does a good job representing what Buck is portraying by ignoring Hank. Hank violates all kinds of protocol and lets Buck try on his jacket early, explaining to him that being inducted comes with responsibilities that he has to live up to. Buck understands and promises Hank he'll straighten up.
God dog, Ray Roy! I hope you got 2 girls in there.
It has been 10 seconds. 1, I'm pretty sure Buck doesn't even know the word willpower exists. And 2, Hank was right down the hall. How did he not hear that? Buck and Ray Roy get into more shenanigans, which Hank does hear, and he finally snaps. He tells Buck what, honestly, the man has deserved to hear for many years now.
I have tried with all my might to save you from yourself, Mr. Strickland. Will not anymore. You're on your own.
The boys find Hank drinking his troubles away at a bar. Dale keeps insisting that all this is happening because Hank is jealous, which again goes nowhere. I don't know why they keep bringing it up. In drinking down his anger, Hank says,
I'm gonna give that SOB an introduction he'll never forget.
oh, now I see why the boys are in this episode. Hank's about to do something stupid, and as his best friends, they're gonna talk him out of it.
I'm not gonna say, hell, I am gonna say what I have been wanting to say.
Dreams are lovely, but they're always followed by me waking up to reality. Hank gives Buck the introduction he deserves, and in doing so makes a fool of himself. And I'm not gonna lie, it's really disappointing. Like, I don't hate Buck, but this should have been a moment in the show for Hank to release all his hurt emotions, and for a lot of Buck haters to get some catharsis. Hank should have been able to say all the things to Buck that he's been holding back for years because of his hero worship. But instead, it's not even that harsh of a criticism, and it's made more silly than it should have been.
Buck Strickland is nothing but a wicked, disgusting bastard making bastard. And now I'm going to vomit.
Yep, that's pretty much a career ender. Later, Hank and Peggy go over what happened and realize what's to come. Hank is miserable while Peggy is livid. Oh, not at Hank, but at Buck.
I guess this has probably put you in a tough spot with the Platinum Circle.
Yeah, well, that dream died when you threw up in True Wagon's hair. But I am not gonna let your career die.
Wow, talk about a selfless moment for Peggy. Everything she worked for this episode is gone because of Hank, and she could not care less. Her husband is her priority. Again, is that out of character? So Peggy goes to wreak vengeance on Buck and Ray Roy by giving them a strict talking to. Or should I say, a strict Lynn talking to. Haha, I have over 100K subscribers.
Because of your shameful behavior, my husband is in danger of losing all he has ever worked for.
Well, Peggy, let's be real here. Buck didn't make Hank do any of the things that got him into this situation. Yeah, Buck was the motivation, but Hank is the one that did the deeds.
Hank has devoted his entire adult life to you and your company. Without him, there is no Strickland Propane.
Okay, that part is true. Peggy succeeds in guilt-tripping the propane duo, and they decide to help Hank out. However, the two get distracted with drinks in a bar fight and come to a realization about their relationship.
Maybe this is why Mama never wanted us to get together.
Who is your mom, by the way? Is it Miss Liz? Wait, no, you're older than 20, so it can't be Miss Liz. Shut up, I know the lore. Buck and Ray Roy decide to finally buckle down and save Hank's bacon. Their last act together before departing forever. Wait, what?
Then we gonna fix things the way fellas like us fix things. And then we ain't ever gonna see each other again.
I get what the episode is trying to say, that Buck and Ray Roy enable each other's bad habits, but they've known each other for like 2 days. That's hardly a fair assessment of their relationship. Also, that brings a problem to the episode, and a huge problem at that. The reason Buck is acting out is because he wants to make up for lost time with his son, so the two get into all sorts of shenanigans together. Why couldn't they just get together after the convention? Hank didn't need Buck to be on his best behavior forever, just until the convention was over. Afterwards, Buck could have spent all the time he wanted with Ray Roy. Buck is rich. He can afford to stay in Memphis a few more days, or travel back if he has to, or even book a ticket to wherever Ray Roy lives. The conflict of the episode did not need to exist. Anyway, as Hank is about to receive his punishment, the propane board gets a call from Buck about an open hospitality suite. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. The board members all attend, but it turns out to be a trap as Peggy invited all their wives to a spa day, and if they don't agree to forgive Hank, well...
All propane men make mistakes sometimes, including some of your husbands.
Lost my bikini top.
And so, Hank's actions are not only forgiven, but he's given an honor he's always coveted, yet never thought he'd receive.
I'm in the Hall of Flame?
All of propane owes you a debt. Most importantly, I owe you a debt. Thanks, old top.
So we get a happy ending for everyone, except for the Stricklands, who agreed to never see each other again. And nope, that was a lie. And that was What Happens at the National. Seriously, I'm too lazy to say the whole title. I didn't realize this when I chose the episode, but I actually have a lot of criticism for it. There's the usual complaints with the later seasons where characters aren't utilized properly, the pacing is bad, and the comedy just isn't what it used to be. But there's a more important critique I have. This was meant to be Buck's redemption episode, the one where he realizes he needs Hank just as much as Hank needs him. Shoot, probably more. But the way it plays out is severely disappointing because in the end, Buck doesn't really give up anything for Hank. It's not as bad as it could have been, but it also could have and should have been much better. If I could, I would definitely rewrite the episode. Bear with me for a bit because this is going to take a minute. The episode would start similarly, but the only characters that go to the convention would be Hank, Buck, and Peggy. Completely leave out Bobby, Joseph, and the boys. They add absolutely nothing. Have Peggy tag along, not to help keep Buck under control, but just going to support Hank. This way later, when Hank is lamenting to Peggy about Buck and she doesn't help him, she doesn't look like a traitor because it's none of her business. After Hank and Buck meet Ray Roy, Hank starts considering keeping them apart, but he doesn't want to because he never had a good relationship with his father, and he doesn't want to ruin that chance for someone else. Then Peggy could slightly mention, maybe even as a joke, that Hank might be jealous of Ray Roy, which is an inner battle Hank could have with himself. Hank would ultimately decide that while he doesn't want to keep a father and son apart, and maybe he is a little jealous, those details are irrelevant as he needs to do what's best for both Buck and Strickland Propane. He prematurely presents Buck with the rainbow blazer and asks that he stay away from Ray Roy for the remainder of the trip. Hank breaking protocol with the blazer is found out, however, and he's reprimanded for it, during which Buck is nowhere to be found because he broke his promise and is off with his son. Because of this, Hank gets drunk, and when he goes to present Buck on stage, with no one to talk him out of it, he unleashes a very clear frustration in Buck that has been building for years. We can still have Hank throw up and still have him being punished at a hearing. Once again, Peggy decides to confront Buck about what happened, but this time, do not have Ray Roy there. Have it just be Buck. Peggy would angrily yell about how Hank is in trouble because of Buck, but Buck, angry about what Hank said on stage, would tell Peggy that Hank made his own bed. Buck never told Hank to do any of the things that got him in trouble. They were all Hank's decisions. Buck would point out that if Hank were there, he'd say a man has to face the consequences of his actions. Peggy would then turn to Buck and say, "You're right. Hank says that about himself all the time. But you know who he's never said that about? You," alluding to the fact that Buck has never faced proper consequences because Hank was always there to bail him out. Peggy would lead Buck to think about how everything he's built has been because of Hank, how Hank was always there for him even when it didn't involve propane, and how Buck wouldn't be wearing the blazer he has now without Hank. At that moment, Buck would get a call from Ray Roy. Ray Roy would have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Buck, something that Buck would never say no to in a million years, and he'll only get one chance to do it. Buck would be about to say yes, but then he'd pause and hesitantly say no, because he has somewhere else he needs to be. Ray Roy would try to playfully guilt trip his dad. "Come on, Daddy, it'll be fun. I can't do this on my own. This is your son talking. Don't you want to help out your son?" Buck would then take a deep sigh and say, "Yes, I do." And then he'd hang up and rush out to help Hank. And the rest of the episode could play out as it did, with Buck tricking the board members to forgive Hank. I think if the episode did something like this, for once having Buck make the sacrifice, and also having him realize just how much Hank has sacrificed for him, to the point that Hank might as well be his son, people would be a lot more accepting of his character. As is, Buck gets his redemption moment, but barely anyone ever remembers him for it. With the way things went, he's always going to be remembered as the boss who took advantage of a good man. This has been Shady Doorags. So long, farewell, Auf Wiedersehen, goodbye.